Everyone, I want to welcome Laura Close. She is a co-founder of Included and an expert in HR. I'm really excited about this conversation with you, Laura, because there's so much going on right now in terms of AI, in terms of HR, in terms of agents, and people are throwing these words around that nobody has any idea what to make of this. There's a huge, and I think a growing number of folks out there that are scratching their head. They're trying to navigate a job search. They're trying to figure out what role does AI and agents have in their small business, their startup, their mid-market or enterprise company. And so everybody's trying to make sense of this. And I'm really excited to kind of dive in deeper with you. And welcome, Laura. Happy for you to kind of make a brief introduction and we can kind of dive in.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Really appreciate that. Looking forward to connecting with you through this conversation and sharing insights with your audience. I here in Seattle, Washington, and it's a great place to have founded a startup. I'm currently co-founder at Included AI, which is Agentic AI for people analytics. So really makes it possible and magical for all the business users inside our organizations to instantly understand the context and the stories and the ways to make decisions off of those people data insights. So making data useful and delightful. And I am just interested to know, what are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, so I'm so excited to dive into this because, first of all, I'd love to know a little bit more about what trends you're seeing out there in terms of HR. And I think it feels like, like everything else, things are evolving. And I think HR has historically been human resource, air quotes, human resources. With AI, with agents, what is HR evolving into? And what are some of the trends that you're seeing?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I think there is a real argument to be made that, we can start with the end user of human resources, right? The managers, the folks inside the business who really depend on HR. At the executive level, we're depending on HR to help us make human capital strategy plans, right? How many folks should we hire? Should we open headcount? Should we stop hiring? Should we focus on retention? We really need HR there. At the manager level, and I think we can all safely say that managers have the hardest role of everyone in the business, right? It's doing that extremely high quality workload on top of caring for the whole flock and really managing learning styles and
Yeah.
promotion cycles and pay. And at the manager level, folks really need enablement, right? They've got two different roles that they're sitting on top of and really looking to HR to say, help me make decisions faster and wiser always, right? And what can you do for me to make that possible? And at the, I see at the independent contributor level, we're really looking for HR to make sure that this is a place where we feel included, where we belong, right? Where the pathways forward for promotion and earning our way forward makes sense and are meaningful to us. And HR has a huge task. And so when it comes to AI, I mean, it really makes the most sense for HR to lead with AI adoption because HR is everything to everyone, and being more efficient is the way that we are able to delight and deliver the data insights at the executive level, the manager enablement at the mid-tier, right, and the clean, organized, and ethical pathways forward at the IC level.
Yeah. So what are some of the needs, evolving needs and challenges that you're seeing company leaders face right now? And for example, how does Included sort of help address some of those challenges?
Yeah, well, listen, HR has not always been invested in heavily with when it comes to technology. And so that can actually lead to like low NPS scores inside the business, right? Like folks can say, oh, the HR organization, right? They can be held in lower esteem simply due to a legacy of underinvestment and not being able to function as data rich of an environment or as tech forward of a capabilities. Like sales has Salesforce, right? Engineering has its
Yeah.
ticketing system through Atlassian and, DevOps and so forth. And so really what we're seeing as a challenge for HR is to figure out, how are we going to take what we have and what we know works and maximize it? And that's where software like Included comes in and other purpose-built AI on the market as well. And what you do is you really want, especially when you're adopting AI, you really want to look at the problem statements that are the most important to you, not the whole business business all at once. We don't want to boil the ocean, right? And so,
Yeah.
for example, the customers that love, the software that my team delivers at market is really, the customers are the ones who really want to be proud of a data-driven HR function. And their whole company has a tendency to really want that data, to want it to make sense, and to want it on a faster cycle. And that's the purpose-built agent that my team has brought forward, really delivers those, data insights to everyone who is badged in a secure way and custom views. But there may be
Yeah.
other companies and other cases, right, where there is a purpose-built AI that would be a better fit for those companies.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about what is a purpose-built AI for folks that are sort of stumbling upon this term for the first time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let's start with a compare contrast. So what is
Yeah.
non-purpose built AI, right? It's like general, it's big, and it's Chat GPT, it's Gemini, it's Perplexity. It's what
Hmm.
we're all, hopefully everybody out there, it's what we're all working with every day because we're all sharpening our skills and becoming users, right? And I think hopefully everyone out there is experimenting with Chat GPT. If you haven't started, today's your day. This is your wake up call. This is your message. Log
Do
in
it now.
immediately and just start, asking ChatGPT to help you, right? So I'll just take, writing blogs as as simple example, right? So if you ask ChatGPT to help you write a blog on a certain topic, you'll begin to see its limitations. Right. And we hear a lot about prompt engineering, which we can get into in a little bit, but you need to coax better and better work out of it. And your final product still feels a little thin. Like it doesn't feel like it was written by a
Yeah.
human, right? ChatGPT will say something like, I left the window open rather than the window was cracked, right? It doesn't have that kind of musicality and that precision. And so that's non-purpose built AI, right? And really, we don't really see the use case for that inside the enterprise right now, except maybe on the back end, the
Mhm.
devs can work off of those models. When we're talking about organizations such as HR inside of our companies, what we're looking to say is, okay, leaders, talent acquisition leaders, HR leaders, it's time to identify 1, 2, or 3 processes that you need to become more efficient immediately. It's a today question, right? It's a specific problem statement. It might be if you're a talent acquisition leader, you really need to get much faster insights about your time to fill, about your other important TA metrics. It might be if you're an HR leader, you need those QBRs generated by AI instantly for all of your business unit
Mhm.
leaders. You might need to enable all your HRBPs. Again, I live in the data insights world with instant data stories that make sense and help guide decisions. And so when we have identified the 2 or 3 processes we want to get started on, that's when you go to market and look for that purpose-built AI that's specifically solving your purposeful need. And that's the distinction.
Yeah. And so what in the use case or the context of HR, one thing I'm really curious about is uh how are these agents being used, or what opportunities are there to be used to have more of a deeper understanding of a company's talent force, because that there seems like a lot of untapped potential there. Individuals within the company, as well as sort of the maybe leadership and executive management, can have better insights into team members. It feels like there's just a lot of opportunities there, and I'm wondering what trends do you see there?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of different ways to slice the question you're posing, right? You could be
Yeah.
interested in their personality types. You could be interested in their career ambitions. You could be interested at a human capital management level in understanding who tends to stay in our company. What sources do we tend to get candidates from that go on to become high performers that
Hmm.
stay beyond 18 months, right? These sort of golden goose questions. There's lots of different ways to ask questions about our workforce. And that's really where the AI is able to come in, because at baseline AI, and we're not even talking about generative AI or agentic AI, just baseline
Hmm.
AI can be trained to recognize patterns and answer questions and run across all your data sources. So when it comes to HR, oftentimes when we want to understand our workforce better, the number one problem is fragmented data, right? We've got some in the
Yeah.
ATS, some in the HRIS, some in the engagement system. And so with purpose-built software, such as the one my team brought to market, we're knitting all those data sources together instantly. And then the AI is cleaning it, which is a big boost. And that's what we should be using AI for, is that grunt work. And then on top
Yeah.
of that, the baseline AI can run questions and deliver answers.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of talk about, these agents, and there's concern about, agents taking people's jobs. That's a huge sort of concern, I think. And I guess, what have you seen in that? What's sort of your opinion on these agents and how they will be used? How are you seeing them being used today, and how do you see that evolving, over the next 12 months, 18 months, 5 years?
It's a great question. It's fair for people to be worried and to be looking out for number one. The
Yeah.
truth is that AI is a lot more like a platform, right? It's more akin to like email, or maybe, those of us who are old enough, we remember from when the internet first got started, right? Or we remember when smartphones first got started, or the first time we started using email, right? And there was a time when the business first adopted email, and folks probably put up a little bit of a fuss, right? And there was a time when we first started, going digital first at work, right?
Yeah.
And having to do things all online. And folks put up a bit of a fuss, but it wasn't that everyone's jobs were eliminated, right? Just like, in the year 2000 and Y2K, like the world really didn't crash, right? And that's kind of the
Yeah.
metaphor that I like to use now. I like to call upon our tribal knowledge of what it was like to begin using the internet, to begin using email, to live through Y2K, to start using a smartphone 24/7. That's what's happening right now. Not so much that jobs are being eliminated. Everyone's job will change, however. Email changed the way people work. The internet
Yeah.
deeply changed the way people work. We didn't see so much of a job loss.
Yeah. It's interesting because, all these technologies they've always, prompted some sort of anxiety among folks, and I think rightfully so in many ways. But for some reason, it feels like, and you could probably say this for all the past revolutions, but for some reason, it feels like this AI revolution is different. I don't know about you. It just feels like something's different here.
Yeah.
The ability for this technology not just to augment what it is we're already doing, but to potentially replace, at a level that it's not like a tool anymore, but it's something that can replace us. Cell phone's a tool, internet's a tool, but now you have this technology that maybe it's not a tool so much, like it's thinking, and yeah, I don't know. It's just, just to play contrarian a little bit, like it feels like it's different. It just feels different. And does that sort of resonate with a lot of the executives and leadership that you've been talking with, or
Well,
how do you think
Eric,
it's?
I love your point. Listen, we're calling it intelligence,
Yeah.
right? And the most sophisticated iterations are agents, right? So we're humanizing it, right? So when we had the advent of email, we didn't say, like the new crowd of stenographers who will be taking over Polly's job, right? So there's terminology associated with
Yeah.
this technology that really begs larger philosophical questions, which I hear you touching on. I
Yeah.
think I think when we talk about, how are executives grappling with this, I think what we're really seeing is within any leader who's sort of worth their salt right now is trying to understand how to expand their workforce with agents as opposed
Hmm.
to replace all the people who they need on staff right now, right? Just back in the day, any leader who was worth their salt would have said, how am I going to get online? How am I going to get a website? I've never had a website before. How am I going to start using email? How am I going to start sending invoices digitally, so forth and so on, right? So
Yeah.
that's really where I would start the conversation. And it will be at least a couple years of us learning, right?
Yeah.
How to be helped, right? I mean, the real challenge here is getting better at accepting help, right? So the Erics of the world are going to be, everyone's going to have agents, right? Can
Yeah.
you manage them? Do you know how to be a manager? Do you know how to evaluate their work? Do you know how to receive help from them, right? Do you know how to talk to them?
Yeah. It's really interesting because, traditionally, right, obviously before this emerging technology, entry level folks don't get to exercise that muscle of delegating work or managing some workforce, right? And now it feels like, someone early in their career will very much be positioned where they're going to have to learn to use that muscle of delegation. How am I going to delegate? And maybe it's not delegating to a human, but maybe it's delegating to, a series of tools that are maybe agentic tools, right? But that muscle of thinking like, okay, thinking more strategically and figuring out how I'm going to delegate this work to this, or this. Again, it could be human, or it could be an AI powered agent, right? It feels like that is sort of an emerging skill that's going to be valued, even as early as entry level. What are your thoughts on that, Laura?
I love that, Eric. You're the first person I've heard say it that precisely. So I'm going to give you a gold star. I'm really in love with what you just said. And let's expand on it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So I was recently flown out to South by Southwest by IBM to stick around with their CHRO, Nicola Moreau, as she headlined their Agentic AI track down in Austin. It was really fun. The packed ballrooms of people, lines out the door. And at the Q&A portion of one of her big public speaking events, this really seasoned data scientist, I'm going to come full circle to your comment, really seasoned data scientist stood at the mic and said, I am a data scientist. I can't even imagine how all the junior data scientists are going to get replaced because for me, coming up through the ranks meant dealing with dirty data. I had
Yeah.
to cut my teeth and figure out how to make sense of the dirty data and make it work. And that's what makes me a great data scientist. And let's come full circle back to what you just said. So now we're going to have young junior level individuals who will be really great at managing and delegating to AI agents. They'll be native. Their work is going to be 10 times more impactful than Mr. Data Scientist who spent maybe 2 years cleaning data for one company
Yeah.
on one project in 1989. And there's no shame in that game. We just got to be honest about it, right? So like, when the grandparents back when we were young were like, oh, my grandson helps me with my VCR because I don't know, like that's what's going to be happening for us at work. We're going to say, oh my gosh, this like Gen Alpha individual is like, running circles around me because they're able to delegate to agents and I'm still learning.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like this technology can really help folks that are coming up in their career sort of maybe catch up. I don't know. It just feels like that. And at least in my experience, one thing that I've learned using AI is how to ask better questions because what you get in terms of response or answer is only as good as the question that you're posing. And I feel like it's helped me become a better question asker.
I
And I
love
think that those, yeah, it feels like those are some of the skills that will become increasingly valuable.
Eric.
Even the even the meta question of, "Hey, ChatGPT, here's the situation. What question should I be asking?" And that's a question that, again, it's kind of meta, but the ability to understand how you can start to leverage some of these tools in these ways, you're basically delegating what question should I ask? Oh, I don't know. Well, let's ask it what questions I should be asking, right? So anyway, it's really been revolutionary for me to kind of think in these ways. And I think, I work with a lot of folks that are struggling to put AI and this emerging technology in the context of their career path, right? Their career path for many of them has been, fairly linear. And a lot of them are concerned about how do I integrate this into my career, on the one side. The other side is like, how do I integrate this into my operations, my business? How should I think about hiring? How should I think about the organization of my talent force? And it sounds like there's a lot of questions that people are asking. And so, yeah, I don't know if this is sort of consistent with what you're seeing out there, Laura, but yeah, it's a brave new world right now. Just shifting gears a little bit, going back, to kind of the workforce and, what are some of the metrics as an executive, as a manager that will start to matter when looking at my workforce of today and my workforce of tomorrow? Like, what are some of the metrics that would be evolving as I look to manage my workforce? Like, what should I be looking for?
As you look to manage your workforce, great question.
Yeah.
Um, and are you thinking about sort of AI readiness when you're asking that question?
Partially, because there was a post I think you posted not too long ago that referenced even using AI as an example to analyze your team members' calendar and how they're allocating time.
Yeah.
And those insights now feel like they're much more accessible
Yeah.
than they were just even a few years ago. And using something like that as a data source for getting a better picture of your workforce, like how can a leader, how can an executive leader, but how can just, a professional gain insights into their own data so that they could be a more effective person in the organization?
Yeah. That's a great question. First and foremost, what what we want to understand is our business goals, right? Like our P&L statement, right? And our needs for the coming year and the coming 3-year
Yeah.
cycle, sort of like where are we headed as an organization? And really, there's no one better than HR to lead that conversation around the strategy. Now, what's happened historically is that HR hasn't always had a seat at the table because it hasn't had the, tip of their fingers data insights to really influence the conversation. And everything devolves into like a he said, she said,
Mm.
the team in Ohio keeps losing members when it could be, driving profit. Well, I don't think that's true. They've never driven profit, right? Like it just becomes this like weird kind of, washing, washing machine spin cycle. And so
Yeah.
that's really an argument for the whole field of people analytics. We want to make data-driven decisions for our workforce strategy such that the entire business is thriving. We've got the belonging metrics, which, are really demonstrating we are a high retention location that has pathways for learning and pathways for promotion. We've got the ability to understand are our high performers leaving. Exit interview data is also really
Yeah.
important for folks to understand. But there's this larger question about, how do I get the right information? Right. And originally we have this he said, she said spin cycle where everything was up for debate. Then we had the field of people analytics was born, right? And now a lot of companies are really excited to be data driven. The next phase is to unlock those metrics so that leaders can instantly know sort of not only what metrics are happening, but why they're happening, really. So what's happened historically in the last decade is a lot of companies have stood up people analytics teams with, frankly, geniuses. They're awesome.
Mhm.
But it takes time to knit and clean the data and then to ask the right questions from it, which goes back to something you said a few minutes ago, which I thought was really
Yeah.
interesting. And with the advent of AI, what's happening now is that people analytics teams are boosting these sort of genius squads that they have by achieving all the grunt work with agentic AI. It's like getting team members at a fraction of the cost to predict your analytics and say, well, this is the trend, right? And then can disseminate the reporting and answer those questions throughout the organization so that the Genius Squad can move to the much higher value projects about modeling, our
Yeah.
connectivity between our pay and our finances and our retention rates and doing the work that helps us to forecast. And so, I think what we're looking at is the not having to always know what the right questions are, what the right metrics are, and really being so delighted and uplifted by, this purpose-built AI that can deliver to you predictions, concerns, and exact reasons why, exact locations why in any kind of generative format, bar charts, stories, dashboards, anything you want.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that so it sounds like, this technology you're seeing examples of it elevating, in your example here with the data scientists, sort of their capabilities. So it feels like that's something that's probably going to be commonplace in terms of elevating folks' capabilities and capacities to get work done. Say that's fair.
I mean, yes. And this would be true for, the large businesses, the small businesses, and everyone in between. We have seen the first startups come to market that are purely agentic AI staffed.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I guess what when you think about HR and you think about just getting better insights into your workforce, are there any trends that you're seeing in terms of other data sources like calendar information? Being able to sort of mine your calendar and how you're spending your time, how you're allocating your time, who you're spending time with. It feels so powerful, right? And that hasn't been, at least in my experience, I haven't known that to be sort of an accessible source of data and insights. Are there other
Yeah.
sources like that you feel are just gold mines of insight?
Yes. So that's a great point. So there's this beautiful, for me, term that captures all of these fingerprints called digital exhaust. So what that term refers to is the sort of like the exhaust that comes out of your car. Like you don't pay attention to it. It's a byproduct, right?
Yeah.
And when we first started grappling with this question about, what we could learn from patterns across the whole team's calendar data, what we can learn from patterns across the length of all of our meetings, who's attending which meetings, which individuals are more likely to have meetings with each other, at what frequencies, which individuals are never invited to the meetings, right? We
Yeah.
hadn't previously thought to track the information in these items. It was considered a byproduct, right? Digital exhaust. And so
Yeah.
really no, what we're seeing is purpose-built technology that's coming out that will scan this information and deliver back to you visualizations and understandings of how your team is working together, where there's room for more efficiencies. Maybe, folks are spending a really long time in meetings every single day. I'm sure anyone who's listening to this podcast has had the experience of working with someone who loved meetings and you were in way too many meetings and you just felt it was super inefficient. That like meme, this could have been an email, right? So we
Yeah.
can start to say, instead of a he said, she said cycle, we can say, this really could have been an email and in the future it will be, right? Because we have some
Yeah.
data backed proof. And that's really where HR is just taking off like a rocket ship right now and benefiting from all of these different purpose built AI tools so that we can make strategic calls and drive and really eliminating that spin cycle debate.
Yeah, there was a friend of mine. She's a CEO of Trilogy, and they were as recently as about a year ago. They were building these agents that would basically act as an avatar for you internally, where people could ask questions of that avatar, usually through a bot format, and it would have access to all your notes, anything you as an individual, your notes, your projects, your folders, files, whatever. And so, like first tier questions would go to that bot. And if there was something that it couldn't answer, it would get escalated to the person. And the idea was that it would save, that linchpin or that expert internally time because they wouldn't have to field all these sort of lower level questions. But then it felt like the next level would be it would create this graph, this professional graph within the organization where people could understand who are sort of the linchpins of experts within the company. And I found it fascinating. Anyway, if people could start to package up their expertise in a way where they don't have to field lower level questions, it could help facilitate learning within the organization. It could minimize the number of meetings you have to sit in on. It would make you basically, as an expert internally, almost instantly accessible to other folks in the organization to facilitate their learning. So I was just fascinated by that whole concept because, yeah, how we sort of package up knowledge and how we disseminate that now becomes, with these LLM layers, much more accessible. You're not just making data accessible, you're making insights, expertise, even dare I say wisdom accessible now and sort of democratized. And I love that word that you used. I ran into a similar concept. I think the word that they used was digital residue. Yeah, but this fingerprint that you leave, that it could be mined for like data, not just data, but like you said, insights. Now it could be mined by these agents or these artificial intelligence in a way that becomes much more accessible and insightful. It's fascinating.
And where have we seen democratization of information previously to
Yeah,
this? Is the internet,
the
right? And the
internet.
internet
Yeah,
changed all of our lives, right? And I expect my teenagers to be more successful because of the internet, not less successful, right? And I just
yeah,
am really, it's a huge focus for my team. It's a big mission for us to democratize data insights for HR inside the company so that they're actionable and that lower level work is cared for. But when we think about, all of us have worked at a company where maybe there was information that was siloed and it wasn't appropriate to silo it. Maybe somebody was sitting
yeah.
on information for political reasons. Maybe someone was hoarding information for their own gain. And then maybe sometimes it's negligence. And then other times it's structural. Like we were talking about the HR data. Like a lot of folks that I talk to use Workday as their HRIS and really find
Mhm.
that the data is like locked up tight in there, no matter how many little modules they tap on top. And, so sometimes it's not very intentional. It's just structural, like the big box of an HRIS, business, or maybe it's political. It doesn't matter, right? In the
Yeah.
scenario where we're applying AI, either basic AI, which is really what we're talking about when we're talking about like gathering information and sharing, like a chatbot, anything that looks like I've learned how to take information and give it is basic AI. And then, or whether it's generative and augmented agent, which is what, my team does, which is it's able to create pictures and reports and do complex tasks. It doesn't matter because we're democratizing access, and that's cool. That's really useful.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I've found is that, how useful let's say an AI or an LLM is a function of the questions that are being asked, but also the context or the prompting that it has. Right. And so, I'm just wondering, when you think about like context for enabling a workforce, how can we make the workforce much more effective? How can we make them more empowered? Just wondering if you're seeing any trends there in terms of like what leaders are looking for and what they're doing to enable their workforce.
Well, there's two different things I want to mention here. One is that I want all of us to hold a pretty strict standard for our AI experiences. Well, it's an evolving field right now. We're not done. Like we're in the very early
Yeah.
days of like the internet's like 1995 out here with the AI agents. But
Yeah.
I want all of us to hold a very strict standard with expectations that the onus is not always on us to ask the right question. So last year there was like a huge chat cycle of, all the talking heads were like prompt engineering, right?
Hmm.
That's like saying email drafting. Like I like no. So like it shouldn't be such a heavy responsibility on Eric or on Laura to ask the right question, and then if not, all is lost, right? That's like 1995 internet thinking, and that's fine. It's where we are at, frankly. But
Yeah.
I want all of us to hold a very high standard to say I should be able to ask a question that's good enough and get really high quality, complex, or useful targeted information back, right? That understands sort of the reason I would ask this question. And the reason I know to tell you this is because my team has built one of the most AI native and, successful agents on the market for people analytics. And so we're able to ingest kind of wonkadoodle questions and then give back to the asker, a better and more precise view that helps them get there faster. So hold that line. And the second piece is domain expertise. So rather than being an expert at AI, which I'm not sure that all of us have the time to become. I certainly did not have the time to become an expert at the internet or email when those arrived, right? And I don't think any of us should be expected to become full experts in AI. We should expect the AI to be useful.
Yeah.
What we do need to be able to do is know our own content and our own swim lane even better than we did before. And it's a great growth challenge, right? So I need you, Eric, to take what you're already amazing at and go to the next level for yourself, such that when you're being assisted, how do you receive help? When you're being assisted by an agent, right? You know if the work that's being delivered to you is good enough. You know if it's quality. You know if it's, if you're in marketing, if it's good marketing help,
Yeah.
you're in data, if it's good data science help, right? You need to be even better at what you're good at.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. I think there's a lot of folks out there they have extensive experience in their respective domains, and now they are struggling with, do I now need to be an expert in AI? And to what extent do I need to be an expert in AI? And I'm one of those folks. Like I'm crawling down this rabbit hole of AI, but I also have some domain experience in certain areas. I guess trying to find that overlap, right, is a question, right? It's a question. But I think LLMs coupled with domain expertise to solve a specific problem, I think that that's kind of where it's at, and clearly you guys are, using your guys' domain expertise in HR coupled with this AI technology to solve some very meaningful problems in a niche space. And so it feels like that's sort of the pattern that that folks should start orienting themselves around.
Yeah, you want to have pretty high expectations of the one purpose you need the AI to solve. Now,
Hmm.
what does it mean to have high expectations, right? Let's have an expectation that the AI is going to help you go beyond a chatbot experience, right? So that would be the baseline AI behavior, right?
Yeah.
Let's have an expectation that the AI can deliver work to you, a written report, a visual, a deck,
Yeah.
predictions, right? That so the AI should be able to deliver work to you, right? And that's generative AI. So we're kind of moving up the hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
And then let's also expect that the AI should be agentic. It should be able to talk with you, to converse, to learn and improve, to understand the context in which you sit and you're asking questions. And then it should be able to do complex behaviors, such as give you a prediction, an image that goes with it, and then initiate a workflow. So that is
Yeah.
really what, that's when you know you're hitting real help, is when it's behaving like a full blown junior staffer, right? And I want us to have higher expectations. It's always fun
Yeah.
to get in the mud and look at how things are built, but having that understanding that I have one problem, I need it solved well, and then
Yeah.
hold the line.
Yeah. I mean, you raise a good point there. This sort of evolution of expectations, where it's not just, a chatbot saying stuff and making a recommendation, but then it's going to start actually implementing that recommendation and giving you what you need, and sort of surfacing sort of the human in the loop, pulling you in as a human because of your domain expertise, as a sort of a sanity check, a QA check, and then sort of redirecting from there. It feels like that's sort of the evolution. And to your point about maintaining higher expectations, I think people fall on this spectrum where they haven't used yet AI. So they're probably blown away when they see, like, oh, it's actually talking to me, and then as they start playing with it more, they start to realize what it's capable of, and it's getting to the point now where it can start doing stuff for you, and being able to delegate work, not actual work, not just, hey, what do you think about this? Right? It's an amazing time right now, Laura, and I'm looking forward to following you guys, and figuring out, where this world is taking us. Watching you guys are solving some interesting problems over on the HR side. And for now, I guess, what, are there any closing thoughts, recommendations, or advice to our audience out there?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me today. I would say that, it's very urgent that everyone listening be working with AI every day. If it's not at work, you should be working with it, in non-work settings, like logging in to Perplexity, to ChatGPT, to Claude. You should be experiencing it.
Oh,
If you're a small business owner, you should be researching how your competitors are, start at the beginning. How are they using AI at the beginning of the business process to source customers and, go through every touch point in the business? And if you're in the enterprise, the customers that we work with, that included, it's a career maker, to bring AI in. And if the forces are really arrayed against you and it's a no can do situation now, figure out the ways that you can use AI to augment your work right now, and you'll be ahead of the curve when it's time. And if you're in a leadership position and your CEO is coming to you and saying, okay, leader of HR, I need proposals on how to use AI, because I hear this all the time. These are the emails I get. What do I do? The CEO said, I want a proposal on how to use AI. Identify 1, 2, or 3 processes right now, such as, where I said it's data and data analytics and democratization. Identify the processes that matter to you, source the purpose-built tool, and keep a pretty high expectation. It's a career maker, so there's really no time to waste.
I love that. I love that. I think, yeah, I love that, because learning how to use AI to further to do your job, is something that I think is going to help the folks that are able to get to that faster. Are going to be able to demonstrate their worth to the market, to their employer, to their team, to the company they might be starting, right? So potential clients. So I love that, Laura. How can our audience members connect with you?
Well, I am very active on LinkedIn, so they're welcome to connect with me there. And obviously, our website, www.included.ai, is a great place to learn more about our purpose-built AI agent for people data.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura, for spending the time with me. It was a pleasure to get to know you. I'm looking forward to doing this again. And again, I'm following you, and you write some really great content out there on LinkedIn. It's very insightful. So, folks out there listening, I definitely recommend you follow Laura, and check out her posts on LinkedIn if you want to keep up. All right. Thanks, Laura. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.